Good afternoon. My name's Andrew Howarth and I'm a teacher trainer for Mondadori Education and Macmillan, based here in Verona in Italy. And this afternoon we're going to have a look at formative assessment in this session of about 45 minutes to an hour or so. During this session there'll be an opportunity to interact, so I may ask you some questions, and it would be great if you could just pop a few answers or your thoughts into the chat box, which you'll find on the screen. If you've got any particular questions, I'll be giving you an email address at the end of this webinar that you can write directly and ask, and we'll respond to everybody who sends a question. Okay, so formative assessment. Not sure if everybody knows the exact meaning of formative assessment or what it is, but we'll certainly get to that shortly. But before we start, I just want you to introduce you to some props. Now, these are coloured plastic cups, and when we do this teacher training session in schools with teachers, I often give out these plastic cups just to show you an example, a really easy example to understand of how formative assessment works. Now you'll see that I've got three colours, slightly different to the colours you can see on your screen. I've got a red one, an orange one, which is yellow on the screen, and a green one. Okay, now what do I want these for? Well, think about when you ask this question to your students in class: do you understand? It's a common question to ask the students, and I used to do it a lot. And most of the time your students will reply, yes, of course, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And well, we just trust them that they do understand, and we attempt to move on with our lesson. But using our plastic cups, can you imagine if we gave them some different options instead of just yes and no? We can say yes, red means no, but yellow means some words I kind of understand. Speak a bit slower. Can you say it again? And green means yes. Okay? So imagine if we use that scale instead of a simple yes and no answer. So let's try it out with you guys. When I speak English at this speed, do you understand me? Do you understand what I'm saying? So just in the chat box, I want you to write red, yellow or green, okay? Or just R, Y or G for this question. Do you understand me when I speak English? Yep, everybody's putting G. Green, G, yes. Okay, good. And these could be the kind of answers that our students give us. Now, these cups can be used for all kinds of things in class, not just do you understand. Let's try a different use for them now. So for those of you on this session, if you work in an Istituto Comprensivo or Scuola Media, I want you to put an R in the chat box. If you work in Scuola Superiore or Istituto Tecnico, can you put an orange or an O, or sorry, a Y for yellow in the chat box? And finally, if you work in tertiary education or in a private language school, G or green. Okay. Quite a few yellows coming in. A couple of reds. Green. Okay. Okay, so this is giving me an idea now of who I'm talking to, because obviously from my place in Verona, it's difficult to know who's on the call, who's on the session. I can see how many of you are there, but I'm not 100% sure where you all teach. So now I have a better idea. The majority of you majority of you teach in Scuola Superiori, a few in Istituto Tecnico, put specifically, a few in Scuola Media, not that many, and again, quite a large number of people who work in tertiary education and private language schools. Okay, have a think about what else you could use plastic cups for with your students in class. What other uses do you think you could use? Not just do you understand? I've given you another example there. Can you think of any more? Just pop them in the chat box. Any uses for plastic cups? Imagine if all your students had a set of plastic cups each on their desk. What could you utilise them for as a teacher? Okay. Yep, someone's written a multiple choice activity. Okay, so yeah, when you've got more than one answer to choose from, you could have answer A, answer B, or answer C. Ask your students, and the students put the correct colour on the top, and you, at a glance, can see if they've got the right answer. Interesting. Yeah, another person has written to choose the type of homework. Okay, so I guess you mean a reading, a writing activity, or maybe a listening activity for homework, yes? Yep, somebody else has put, I guess this is from Scuola Media, to choose a game or a song or a story to do in class. Okay, so yes, we can do it as a choice, but also as a scale of understanding. Now, something else to ask you. I'm going to give you some scenarios, and I want you to think about if these things have ever happened to you. Now, the first one, you introduce a new section of the course and no one shows any interest. None of your students show any interest. Not interested, no, boring. What about this example? You're working on a topic or a theme or a subject or a unit in class, and you ask your class a question or for some more examples or to expand on something, and nobody talks. Everybody just sits in silence and looks at you. Has that found familiar? Has it happened? What about this one? Despite having a great feeling or a good feeling about how your lesson went, you hear from students' parents or other teachers in the school that some people in your class, some of the students, are having difficulty. Okay, I want you to just think about those three scenarios and think about if that's happened to you. A couple of people are writing already, yes, all of them. Never number 3. Oh, okay, yeah. So some teachers are never happened to number 3. It's always a great success, always very successful. They never want to talk. Yes, some students can be a bit shy or a bit reluctant to speak, and we'll look at some reasons for that a little bit later on. Okay, some things to think about why these things may happen. Is it because they didn't want to do what you said, or they didn't know how to do it? Or maybe they didn't understand what you wanted them to do. They were lazy, uninterested, or not motivated to do it. Or they're just teenagers and that's the way they are. Or all of the above. Well, let's look at those 3 scenarios again and think about them for a minute. The first one, they introduce a new section of the course and no one shows any interest. That's before an activity takes place, okay? Before you start doing something. The second, you are working on a topic and no one speaks when you ask for examples or ask a question, that's during an activity. And finally, despite having a great feeling, the lesson's finished, they've gone out, you're beginning to get negative feedback, or you're beginning to hear things aren't quite right. That's after the activity. So you can see we've got 3 stages: a before, during, and after the activity. So one question we ask, or 2 questions we ask as teachers, or we ask ourselves about how lesson or learning went, is how can we check that the students have understood? And how can we make sure that learning has actually taken place? So, do you understand? Is not a very effective way of checking. Can anybody think of how we check these 2 things? How we check the student has understood, and how we make sure that learning has actually taken place? Just pop your comments or suggestions in the chat box there. Ask them. Yes, we'll look at how we ask students a little bit later. Again, not a closed question like, do you understand? A test. Yes, very good. A test. That's quite a usual way of assessing our students, a test. And obviously if they pass the test, then learning has taken place and they understand, and they can now use that knowledge. I want you to think about the word assess and think about the word test, okay? A lot of us believe that after we've finished teaching a unit or a module in a course, then the natural thing to do is to test to see what has happened. And that's commonplace in learning, and that's called summative assessment. Okay, imagine it's a summary, it's a way of assessing what has been assumed during that course. Formative assessment is something that happens during a course of study. Okay, so it's along the way. So we have formative assessment and then summative assessment. Let me try and put it in a different way, a different context for you. Okay, here we have our chef on the left-hand side, and the chef is preparing his fish special for the day. Now, while he's preparing his fish special, he's seasoning it. He's seasoning the sauce, tasting it. Needs a little bit of salt, so a bit of salt. Still not there. A bit more salt. Maybe a bit of pepper to lift the flavour. Yep, nearly there. Maybe some finely chopped herbs like parsley or chervil just to finish the yes, that's it, that's the taste. That's the taste. Calls the waiter, waiter please take this out to table 4. And you can see here we have a lady at table 4. Now, everything that happens up to the point where the lady receives her dish is formative assessment. As soon as the lady tastes the fish dish and tries the dish, it becomes summative assessment. Summative assessment, there's no more changes, there's no more time to modify anything. That's it, that's the final result, okay? And that's what we evaluate the prowess or the competence of the chef on, the summative assessment at the end. But meanwhile, during the preparation stages, there's lots of controls happening, lots of checking, lots of assessing, and that's formative assessment. So, when should we assess? Here you go, put something into your chat box here. Either before, during, after, or all of the above. When should we assess? During an activity, after an activity, before an activity? After. Yep, a couple of people. All right, yes. All of the above. Yeah, a few all of the aboves coming in. Yeah, I'll give you a clue. There you go. When all of the above is given as an option, it's usually that answer. Okay, let's look. be an example of formative assessment in action. Okay, here we have my lesson on volcanoes. Okay, today's lesson is on volcanoes. Now, this is my student, and my job as a teacher is to get my student interested in volcanoes. Okay, volcanoes, exciting, great, brilliant. She doesn't look that excited. As teachers, you probably already use a couple of formative assessment techniques without realizing that you are. Here's one of them. Okay? Now the situation is you introduce a new section of the course and no one shows any interest. Do you remember that from a couple of slides back as an example of a problem that some of us may have? So we start the lesson by seeing what our students know about volcanoes. Okay? Simple question. What do you know about volcanoes? Well, what do you know about volcanoes? Can you put something in the chat box? Can you put a couple of keywords or something that you know about volcanoes? Maybe some vocabulary or... Okay, lava, good. Eruptions, yes. Volcanoes erupt. Very hot. Mount Etna, yes. Yeah, lucky to have a couple of volcanoes, active volcanoes in. Yes, okay. All right. So we generate a list from what our students say. Lava, eruptions, magma, there we go, dormant, extinct, active. Okay, so we've got an active volcano down in Sicily, and hopefully an extinct one near Napoli. Okay, now that's all well and good, and that gives us a good idea of where to start with our students on the subject of volcanoes. Okay, but maybe not everybody's contributing to that, and maybe I haven't got anybody's attention. So how can I think about getting everybody's attention? Well, I'm going to ask them to interact a little bit more. I'm going to change that question around and ask them what they don't know about volcanoes, which is a difficult thing for people to think about. How do I know what I don't know? Well, put it a different way. What would you like to know about volcanoes? Think of a question you would like to ask about volcanoes. Something you're unsure about, a doubt. How to know when they are going to erupt, yes. How hot they are inside, yeah, not exactly, not very hot. Okay, it's the idea. Okay, so here's some more examples of questions. When they're going to erupt, yes. Why they erupt. Why they are located where they are. Why do you find volcanoes in some places and not other places? And you'll notice here as well that the last column I've got on my table is an empty column that says what you have learned. Now, this is a classic style of formative assessment used before, during and after an activity. Okay, and it's called KWL questioning. The reason it's called KWL questioning, and that acronym stands for what you know, that's the K, what you want to know, there's the W, and finally what you have learned. Now, one of the reasons this works is because we have natural curiosity as humans. Okay, so even the person who's just least interested in volcanoes, not interested in volcanoes at all, okay, and they're in class and they're listening to all of this happen, and somebody says, why do volcanoes erupt? I want to know why volcanoes erupt. And the teacher says, okay, that's your homework. I want you to research that. Come back to the next lesson with an answer of why volcanoes erupt. Now that child who's not interested, who's listened to this interaction between the teacher and the student, thinks to themselves, I wonder why they do erupt. Oh, it doesn't matter, I'm not interested. But that curiosity gradually gets to the student until finally he can't take it anymore. He needs to know why they erupt. So he runs home, puts it into Google, why do volcanoes erupt? Out comes the answer. Oh, fantastic, right. Now I can just forget about it. But of course they don't forget about it because they engaged with it and it becomes memorable. And then that goes in the third column, something they have learnt about volcanoes. So let's look at that in a different context. Let's look at KWL questioning in a Scuola Superiore setup. This is the start of a unit. Okay, this is the start of Unit 4. This is actually Language Hub by Macmillan. Fantastic book if you get to see it. Now here we've got a picture of a city or a city suburb. The title is Change. There's a quote, there is nothing permanent except change. Does anybody know what city that is, where that photograph may have been taken? Rio, Brazil, okay, yeah, it looks a bit, maybe Sao Paulo. Taiwan. Right, somebody wrote Napoli, Naples. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's actually Hong Kong. Okay, so this is a picture taken in Hong Kong. So this is the lead into the unit. So the discussion activity, the before activity that one would do before going into the unit. Now the unit itself has a list of objectives. And looking at these objectives, you can see that they require a certain amount of communicative skills. One needs to know how to make an argument for and against something, to ask questions, to make predictions, to summarize. There's lots of skills needed in order to meet these objectives. So the students got quite a lot of work to do. So off we go. Let's try and see, using our plastic cups, okay, and I want you to just again put R, Y or G in the chat box. If I was to ask you now could you talk for 1 minute about Hong Kong? If it's red, no, don't ask me. If it's yellow, maybe. I might have some trouble. I don't know that much, but I'll try. And green is, yep, I'm happy to try that, no problem. So what would you say? Your knowledge of Hong Kong. A few reds coming in, okay. One green, maybe you've been to Hong Kong. Okay, so mainly reds and yellows there. So let's go to the first activity, the before activity. This is what the book tells us to do, okay? Work with a partner, discuss the questions, look at the picture, what change does it show, is it positive or negative, read the quote, do you agree with that, and what have been the most important changes in your life. Okay, so we're in class, in pairs please. Yes, thank you. In pairs, please look at these 3 questions and discuss them in your pairs. So can you imagine now that your students are in pairs and are discussing this? 14, 15-year-old kids. Look at the picture, what change does it show? Is it positive? Per me è positivo, sì, perché già ci sono le case vecchie, poi c'è un skyscraper. Okay, va bene, quindi positive. Read the quote, do you agree with it? There is nothing permanent except change. Cosa vuol dire? But see, yes, I agree with it, yes, okay. What have been the most important changes in your life? Maybe for a kid of 15, going from Scuola Media to Scuola Superiore was maybe the biggest change so far. Apart from that, I don't know what else would be massively important, but so we begin to get the feedback from students, and it's very similar. It's everybody saying the same things here. Everybody, it's positive, yes? Everybody says positive. Everybody agrees. Do you agree with the quote? Yes, we agree with the quote. Most important changes in your life, going from Scuola Media to Scuola Superiore. Now, if we approach this with KWL questioning, look at the difference. So before we even get to these three questions, we're still on the picture, okay? I ask my students, what do you know about Hong Kong? Part of China. Lots of protests, or there were lots of protests recently in Hong Kong. Rich people live there. There's an interesting airport. I don't know if any of you have ever flown into Hong Kong, but it has a very interesting approach from the plane. It just appears out of nowhere and you land. What would you like to know about Hong Kong? Well, regarding those protests that happened recently, what are the protests about? Who else is involved? What other countries are involved? What's at stake here? Bit of critical thinking here, a little bit of curiosity is happening. Okay, take that away, try and answer your questions, and list maybe the sources of where you're getting your information from. It's not the teacher is there just to facilitate the task, not to provide all the answers and the knowledge. The students have to learn where they can find the answers, where they can find the knowledge. And so here you can see that this is perfectly set up to go on to now answer the three questions. Look at the picture. What change does it show? Is it positive or negative? Now, knowing that Hong Kong used to be part of the UK up until 1997, has that got something to do with it? Has that got something to do with the difference between one type of housing and this type of housing? Have the protests got anything linked to that? Is there any background there? The change from living under UK rule to Chinese rule? There's a lot more happening now, and there's a lot more to discuss and a lot more opinions to give, and that will help us get to the objectives of the unit. If we just ask those three questions without doing any kind of formative assessment, then the results will be very similar and very basic. Now let's go to during the activity. Okay, so we've moved on now. Now, the second scenario in our problems was this. You are working on a topic and you ask your class a question or for some examples and no one speaks. Now, this happens to us a lot, and it's kind of the teacher's fault for making this happen. Because if I ask somebody a question, if I put them on the spot, then instantly there's panic, instantly there's a mental block, instantly you can't answer the question. Imagine my Italian students come in and I ask a question to Paolo. It's Wednesday today, and I ask Paolo what he did on Sunday. And Paolo has to think. Paolo has to first of all understand the question, and then he has to actually think about what he did on Sunday. Maybe he doesn't even know what day it is today. Go back 3 days, Sunday. Sunday. No, that was Saturday. What did I do on Sunday? And then slowly, okay. And it's all coming back, but it's in Italian still, so maybe he has to change it to English, has to find the words. I went, which tense? Is it present perfect? Is it past simple? Meanwhile, the rest of the class, including the teacher, are waiting for the answer. Come on, Paolo, come on. Valuable time's ticking away. So, when we ask questions, we need to allow preparation time. First of all, we need to ask the right type of questions, the right format of questions, and we need to give thinking time for the students to come up with worthwhile answers. Okay, now this type of formative assessment is called think, pair, share. Okay, think, pair, share, and it's exactly what it says. So think for 30 seconds, pair talk to the person next to you and talk about what you thought and listen to what they thought, okay, and then share that with the rest of the class, okay? So an example, what did you do on Sunday? Have a think about it for 20-30 seconds. And when you're ready, speak to the person next to you and tell them what you did on Sunday. Listen to what they did on Sunday. Okay, after 1 minute, Paolo, what did you do on Sunday? On Sunday, I went to the cinema to see the premiere of a new film. What did you do, Laura? On Sunday, I helped Mum prepare lunch because we had nonno and nonna over. Lots more interesting answers, absolutely no copying of answers, and everybody giving and using more language. So the advantages are clear if you do wait before you get your answers from your students after asking questions. Instead of that awkward silence, instead of waiting for one person to come up with the dream answer, the perfect model answer, you're giving everybody a chance. You're involving everybody in class to come up with their way of doing, their way of responding to it. So these are the kind of things you'll find. The answers will be longer, there'll be more language. People will feel less threatened, less on the spot. So they're ask someone else, that situation will be less. You'll find that students have got more confidence because they've already practiced with the person next to them. Maybe the person next to them has said, no, non si dice così. Okay, right. Improving on other answers. Yeah, I did what Paolo did, and I also went out for a pizza afterwards. More alternative explanations will be offered, more varied responses. Okay. Now, be careful when you ask questions. We have open and closed questions. Open and closed questions produce different things. Open questions is when you want to get lots of output from somebody, and closed questions is when you want to confirm something. And unfortunately, we tend to use closed questions when we want to confirm if someone's understood. Do you understand what to do? Yes. Cosa dobbiamo fare? But what are we going to do now? Somebody has to actually produce an answer. Okay, we're going to read what you've written on the board and then write 6 examples of... Okay, everybody clear with that? Fantastic. On we go. After the activity. So here was the scenario for the problem after the activity, that despite having a good feeling about how your lesson went, you hear from students, parents and other teachers that some people in your class are having difficulty. Now, let me introduce you to the exit slip. The exit slip, fantastic. When I first was shown the exit slip, I was blown away. I was like, well, that is so simple. Why haven't I done that up until now? And ever since that moment, I've done it all the time. I do it in teacher training workshops. I do it when I teach in class. I do it with young learners. I do it with adults. I do it with business students, whoever. And it's just a classic way of getting instant feedback on how your lesson was. Not how you think your lesson went, how your lesson actually was for someone else. Okay, let me give you an example. This is one design of exit slip, okay? Probably aimed at maybe a middle school or early high school age. Name 2 things you learned or improved on in class today, okay? Name 1 thing you hope to learn or improve on, and the final one, just a little bit of fun. How you feeling? How do you feel now? Smiley, angry, confused, sleepy, hungry, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the student just fills that out. You give them 5 minutes or so towards the end of the lesson, and as they leave the class, they just leave it on your desk. Here I've got a space for students to put their name and also the date. This is another example here. What's the easiest thing we did in class today? what is the most difficult thing we did in class today? And check the box that describes your feeling about question 2. Because that in itself is showing you how your students are learning. Have they understood? What do you need to do differently to help them understand? Do you need to go back again at the beginning of the next lesson and go over it again? Now these questions can be totally personalized. Okay, here's another example. One thing you loved, one thing you didn't love, and one suggestion for your teacher. Tell me how I can do it differently. I've got my opinion of what I think I should be doing, but if you've got a better idea, or if you've got something that you think will be more effective, let me know. And through this feedback, I just managed to adjust and finely tune lessons and delivery and activities. I eliminate things that aren't working, and I add suggestions that have been given to me, add different activities, different approaches, take more time to explain activities. And it's all thanks to just asking people, what did you think? Okay, in a workshop situation, when we do this seminar, we give out a list of different types of formative assessment techniques. So some that are used before an activity, some that are used during an activity, and some that are used after an activity. And we put all of the participants into small groups, so maybe 2, 3 or 4 people in a group, and each group has their own little sheet, their little scheda, with a formative assessment technique on it. And what they have to do is that they have to look at this formative assessment technique, and they have to ask each other questions or comment on it in their group, and then they have to produce a poster that explains to other people about that formative assessment technique. Okay, so they read the information, they digest the information, they question the information, they add to the information, they personalize it, and then they present it to everybody else. Okay, and at the end of this, when all of the groups have finished their poster, we put them all up on the walls, and we do a thing called a gallery walk. Now the gallery walk is where everybody walks around the room and looks at everybody else's poster. They can leave comments with post-it notes, so just write a question maybe, or a comment or a suggestion, and they can stick that onto the poster. And it's a fantastic way for everybody to get a lot of information at the same time without having to listen to the teacher relay that information. Okay, so everything is student-centered. Students present, students question each other's work. So unfortunately we can't do that in this scenario, but what I'm going to do is run through some of these formative assessment techniques for you over the next sort of 5-6 minutes or so. And you've also got an opportunity to request the PDF of all of these scheda, which will explain in more detail than I'm going to give you now how to do these formative assessment techniques in your class. Now, remember that the idea about formative assessment techniques is that they're easy, they're basic, they're common sense. Okay, so first thing, now we'll call the before the activity the red cup activities. Okay, so we've got 4 here plus a digital one. Now the entrance tickets, it's the opposite of exit tickets. So when somebody comes into the class, you give them a piece of paper and there's a question on the board. Okay, and it could be how much do you know about this, or how well do you think this happens, or any kind of question you like. The students fill in the response, okay, and then give the question, the entrance ticket to you, and while they're doing the first activity, you can look through them. Okay, and it gives you an idea of how prepared students are for that particular theme, context activity, or whatever you're doing in that lesson. Knowledge rating is kind of the same. So a knowledge rating, you'd give your students an option to maybe rate something out of 5 or 10. Okay, how confident are you in World War II history? 7. How well do you know the first 20 elements of the periodic table? 2. What's your command of the present perfect like? 6. Again, it's a great way for the teacher to gauge how much students know before you start. Mind map. This is probably one of the most widely used one with teachers. Mappa concettuale, a way for students to put on paper what's in their head in a logical form. Okay, and it can be something that is individual, or it can be a group activity done on the board behind you, where you're developing ideas and sorting them out into categories, expanding, etc. And KWL questions was the one we looked at in more detail earlier on in the session. Now, another example of before activity formative assessment techniques is brainstorming. Now, brainstorming is something that, again, we do, but I'm not sure if we do it effectively enough. The idea of brainstorming, storm means lots of things happening at once. Your brain, your cervello. What you want to do in a brainstorming activity is get as much out of your head and onto paper as possible without questioning it, without going, I don't know if that will work, maybe yes, maybe no. It doesn't matter. That can be done afterwards. And digital applications are fantastic for this. I'm going to show you one. This is Answer Garden. Okay, Answer Garden is an app available or website available. And if you do use digital devices in class, you can just set this up very easily. Your students go to answergarden.ch, put the code in, the class code, and then just write a word. And it looks just like this. And within 5-10 minutes, you can build up this massive word cloud. And it's just a fantastic way to brainstorm vocabulary. Okay, let's move on to during the activity formative assessment techniques. So again, these are along the way. These are when we want to interact with our students and find out whether things are going in, whether things are okay. Can we continue like this? Do we need to slow down? Do we need to repeat anything? So the first part here, question walls and parking lot. Now, during a session, a class, even now during this webinar, some questions are coming in. And unfortunately, in this particular circumstance, I can't stop and answer the question completely without going off course. Okay, obviously I've got some things that I need to say within a certain amount of time, so I'll get back to those questions later. Now, in a class situation, you can take those questions, write them on a post-it and just stick them on the wall. And then when you do have a free 5 minutes, go to the question wall, take a question off and address the question. Okay, parking lot is more for things that are a little bit off topic, and question walls are for questions that people may want to ask autonomously without putting their hands up during an activity. I'd like to know the answer. I'm just going to write it down and put it there, and the teacher will come to that later. Quick think, quick write. Another interesting concept. At any point in the lesson, just stop and ask students to quickly summarize what they're doing. Okay, have a quick think about what you're doing at the moment and where you've got to, what you've understood, what you've concluded so far. Write down 25 words of where you are with this activity right now. And it just stops everybody and gives them time to reflect. Think, pair, share, we looked at before more comprehensively, and the importance there of questions and how we ask questions and the time we give to people to respond. And the traffic lights, coloured cups and 3 fingers, all the same kind of thing. Do you understand? 3 fingers for absolutely, 2 fingers for can you say it again, and 1 finger for cosa detto. Okay, fingers up, coloured cups up. And a digital corner during the activity, for example, with the poster activity I showed you before with the gallery walk. Again, this is something you can do using digital tools. This is a site called diagrams.net. And again, this is a way to easily make infographics or any kind of visual diagrams, Venn diagrams. This is a mind map, for example. And again, something that students can do in pairs on digital devices and then share on the class lavagna interattiva or the interactive whiteboard. Finally, after the activity, 2 stars and a wish. This is kind of similar to a gallery walk, but this is where pairs or groups of students produce something. So it could be a project. For example, in a scuola media situation, if you're doing a project on the ancient Romans or something like that, maybe you'll produce a poster with various information, various designs. And what happens is the students circulate once they've finished, and they have 2 stars to award for things that they think is exceptional. And they also have a post-it where they can write a wish, so something that maybe could be better, something that they would like maybe shown differently or explained differently, and they're free to stick that wherever they want on the work. Okay, so once the students go back to their original work, they'll find stars, suggestions, help in order to improve something. Exit slips we've looked at, and 3, 2, 1 is another type of exit slip. So it's 3 things you like, 2 things you are going to try, and 1 thing you'd like to know more about. Okay, it's just a way of getting students to think back to what just happened, and also for a teacher, for you to understand what they found memorable about your lesson, because you remember something when it's associated to something else. So a memorable occasion will always be easy to remember than just something that happened. 1-minute papers, again, a summary at the end of the lesson. Your students have 1 minute to write down as many words or a small passage to describe today's lesson as possible, and they can leave that with you, and it helps you understand what they understood from the lesson. Is your lesson objective the same as what they achieved during the lesson, or is it completely different? The peer feedback, the self-assessment, again, the kind of things we looked at in 2 stars and a wish. The self-assessment kind of relates back to the exit slips. It's reflection, it's constructive criticism, constructive feedback to each other. You don't actually spell it like that. It's got an I in it. Okay. But you don't pronounce the I. That kind of peer feedback helps, rather than have the teacher tell you. And again, the digital app here, or a digital way of doing this, silent polls, okay, Survey Planet, for example, is another fantastic one. If you are digitally orientated, and if your students are mature enough to use digital devices in an educational scenario, these surveys are very easy to set up. SurveyMonkey is another one. 2 or 3 questions. Your students just log on to, or they just click on the link or put the class code in. 2 or 3 very quick multiple choice questions. It's all autonomous, anonymous. There's no pieces of paper, there's no names involved. It's just instant feedback for the teacher. Okay, So we've talked a lot about some formative assessment. We've looked at before, during and after, and I've given you quite a few different examples. And again, those examples are available for you to download in a PDF form to look at in more detail and to try in class. But what about this other type of assessment, the formative assessment and then summative assessment? So summative assessment is the other type. Okay, now we all think about tests when we think of summative assessment. So how can we make summative assessment a little bit more engaging or effective? Well, here's 5 ideas, okay? 5 ideas just to finish this seminar off, this workshop off. 5 things for you to think about and to try the next time you are doing summative assessment. So the redo. Now, when we give people a test, we often give them one chance, one opportunity, one tentativo, okay? And their final result is based on that one attempt. What if we gave them another attempt? Or what if we got them to redo the test after they've understood where they went wrong? So I don't mean give them the answers, I mean correct it, right or wrong. You could maybe make suggestions about why they got it wrong without giving them the correct answer. And then get them to do the test again and see what the improvement is. And show them the difference between their first attempt and their second attempt. It sounds very easy, but how many of us do it? We don't have time to do it. Why don't we have time to do it? Because we've got to rush through the syllabus. But what if rushing through the syllabus was the least effective way of teaching? And at the end of it, everybody failed. So, summative assessment. Think about doing a test twice. See if you can get some improvements going there. Student authored exams. Once they understand what a question is supposed to look like, get them to write a question in that style. You'll find a lot more out about your students, how they think. Performance tasks, competence-based activities. Competence has always been a buzzword, well, it has been for the last 5 or 6 years in state schools in Italy. How can somebody show that they know how to apply knowledge? So performance task at the end of a period of study. Authentic challenges. People are looking for, students especially, looking for relevance between what they're doing in class and in the outside world. Okay, why am I doing this? I'm never going to use it again. I often think to myself, trigonometry. I did trigonometry for years at school. And is there a situation where I've actually ever needed to use the tan, cos or sin button on my calculator? No, but what if I thought about it and brought in a challenge or something where trigonometry would help me solve that challenge? So think about that. Think about what you're doing in class and how that can be applied to the real world and make it authentic and make it challenging. And finally, the most useful thing for a student is to be able to show what they can do. Showcase their skills in English, okay? Via either a presentation, and that presentation could be a PowerPoint presentation, it could be an oral presentation, a portfolio, an example of how I write an email, an example of how I write a complaints letter. Those are the kind of things that employers are looking to see. Okay, employers don't necessarily need to see a pass or a fail at first certificate level or something like that. They want to see a bit of personality. They want to see what their candidates can actually do in a real life situation. Now let's look at just a page in a book. Okay, this is again taken from Language Hub. And look at the question. Look at the example from the video, read the information in the box. What does app mean? Why do we use abbreviations, acronyms and initialisms? Okay, and underneath we can say here a definition of what abbreviations are, and then finally in part B we can see some current acronyms, relevant acronyms as well, ones that students are likely to encounter on the internet or in any kind of written text. Okay, FAQ, for example, frequently asked questions, DVD. Anybody know what DVD means? In fact, DVD is probably already vecchia tecnologia, no? Okay, so this is an authentic challenge, okay? These are real life acronyms. These are things that people need to know. SMS. What does SMS actually mean? Everybody knows the term SMS. PDF, there's another one. What does PDF mean? So these are the kind of research activities. It's an authentic challenge, okay? You as a teacher don't need to stand there and tell everybody what they all stand for. That's exactly what the students need to be doing. And then after it's done, this could become a student-authored question. What kind of acronyms do your students come across in their daily life? Now, they're probably looking in different places to you. The acronyms that I'll encounter in my work may be different to the acronyms that someone else encounters in their work, okay? Especially if your students are into gaming or maybe music or IT. There's specific acronyms for every sector of English. So let them go away, come back with 10 acronyms and share those acronyms around the class to be solved. When it comes to creating a test, so the classic summative tests, the end of unit, end of year test, it can be a chore creating these tests. And one fantastic thing that Macmillan have launched this year with language, it's available through the Language Hub digital element online, is this test generator. And it saved me hours. It saved me hours and time with scissors and a photocopier and the rest of it. It's all based on the content and the themes that you find in the units, but you can actually pick and choose what you want to add to the test. And how do you know what to add into the final summative test? Well, it's all based on the formative assessment you've done during the course. So if you've done enough checks and if you've done enough formative assessment during the course, then you probably know already that you don't need to spend so much time summatively testing the present perfect. You've already done it, your students understand it, they can use it, you've created situations where they know how to use it. However, the passive, that's still pretty tricky for them, so maybe I'm going to put some passive questions into the final test just to make sure that that's all understood. So the test generator allows you to pick and choose from the syllabus of the CEFR level. So if you're on a pre-intermediate A2 course, or if your exit level's B1 plus, or B1 or B2 or whatever, the test generator allows you to mix and match and put in specific content for what you've been doing. And the other one is to go back and look at specific grammar issues or vocabulary issues. Things that are bothering your students, maybe things that have been put into the exit slips that they're still struggling with, still having difficulty with. And through this LMS, this learning management system or platform, you can personalize the way that the system generates the questions. So if you need your students to concentrate on passive, for example, then the system will generate from a question bank a series of questions to make sure that they get it. And once they get it, it will move on. It's adaptive and it allows you as a teacher just to know that your students are working on the places where they need to be stronger, where they need to be better. Okay, we've come to the end. So that's an hour and that flew by. But what I'd like you to do before you go is to do an exit slip for me. As I said before, I like to do exit slips with every incontro I do, be it with students or teachers or business professionals. I always like to ask them what they think at the end. So here's the 3 things I want from you. Can you write down for me in the chat box? Okay, and this is anonymous, so you can't see each other's. Don't worry about that. One thing that you will try from this seminar. One thing you want to know more about, and one thing you found difficult to understand. And I hope that the difficult to understand part wasn't me talking too fast. Well, let's see. Okay, so I'll keep the chat box open for another couple of minutes. And if you'd just like to write down one or all of those things, that would be better for me. If you could write one thing that you're going to try from this seminar, so maybe one technique, one thing you want to know more about, so maybe that was those the peer feedback or self-assessment. Maybe that's something you're thinking about a bit more, you're going to do some research on. And one thing you found difficult to understand, and again that part's very interesting for me, because it helps me as a trainer to understand whether or not I'm explaining things clearly, or maybe I'm going too fast, or maybe I'm also going too slow. So a couple of things already in there, things that you're going to try. KWL, yeah, very popular. KWL questioning is something that most teachers do already. The first part anyway. What do you know about? But the what don't you know about, or what would you like to know about? That's the bit that gets the curiosity going. So yes, try that. What else have we got? The exit slips, yes, exit slips. Go to the exit slips. You'll have a lot of enlightenment from exit slips. That it will show you things that you never even considered before. So yeah, get designing those exit slips. If you don't want to use photocopies or cut up pieces of paper, just write 2 or 3 questions on the board behind you and have students write down on a scrap of paper. Okay, everyone's got a scrap paper bin in the classroom. Just get some of that, tear it up, give everyone a little piece of paper and have them write on that. You don't have to keep them, just look at them and it will give you a instant feel for, or instant knowledge of how that lesson went without having to wait to hear it from someone else. Something you want to know more about? Yeah, the test generator. Okay, well, anything like that, anything around the digital part or access to Language Hub or samples of Language Hub or samples indeed from any Macmillan or Mondadori educational product, please do get in touch with us. I'm going to give you the email address now. I'll put it up on the screen. Okay, there we go. It's the one at the top there, webinar@mondadorieducation.it. So if you just write to them, put in the soggetto, formative assessment, or English webinar with Andrew, or something like that, just to make it easily identifiable. And we'll get back to you straight away with that. So if it's a sample or a SAGI request, or indeed a didactical or theoretical methodological question about anything that we've covered today, we'll definitely answer that. If you want copies of the slides, we've got them available in PDF, so everything you've seen you can have, and also those different SCEDA that I was talking about with each of the formative assessment techniques before, during and after, listed and explained, and again in a nice kind of ebook style for you to have a look through when you've got a bit of free time. And some of us have got some free time at the moment, so good to utilize that to the max and get up to speed on that. Well, just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining me today for this session, and looking forward to seeing you next time. If you've got any requests or suggestions regarding other themes that you'd like to go through in a workshop, please do let us know. Thank you.